Hello out there, all my bookish friends in booktube land. I do hope that you're all wonderful. I have got an announcement for everybody now, something to get very excited about. And that is, in February, there is a event taking place that's being hosted called Febregency, or Febregency, depending on how you want to say it. Now, this was thought up wonderfully by Emma at the Bookish Princess. That's her YouTube channel. Go and check her out. She did this last year with some others, and this year I've been asked to join in as one of the co-hosts. And I've got to say, come along, because the three other co-hosts are amazing. You will love them. So there's Emma, like I say, Bookish Princess. There's Jennifer Brookes, one of the first booktubers I ever watched. She's so erudite. She, like this channel, focuses strongly on the classics, but covers so wide and varied a pitch amongst all of that and the history of the time. Then there's Christy from Dostoevsky in Space. Christy is just so gregarious, one of the nicest people in all of booktube land. Just watch her videos, you will know exactly what I mean. It's almost the kind of person I imagine would be the ideal road trip partner, if you know what I mean. So much fun, always chatty, plenty to say. And like I say, there's Emma as well, Bookish Princess, and if you watch her videos, wow, you've got eloquence and a splash of fantasy and the best editing B-roll on booktube you will ever see. I'm so envious. So anyway, this is what happens in Febregency. We have a group read and a set of challenges, as it were, so that if you can engage in any one of the individual challenges, you're taking part in Febregency, and it's a chance to steep yourself like a tea bag in the period of Jane Austen. Now, of course, Jane Austen is the big hitter in the Regency period. I'll just say, by the way, Regency period, we're classing it on the broad Regency period, so 1795 all the way up to about 1837, which is when George died and Victoria took over. So that's the period, and the group read is going to be Evelina by Frances Burney. Now, have you read any of Frances Burney? You see, she wrote 4 novels, 8 plays, I think, did a fair bit of poetry. She had a strong influence on Jane Austen, and she is very much right there at the forefront of the sentimental novelists. She was highly praised by none other than Dr. Samuel Johnson, like the greatest critic ever. Edmund Burke, also the renowned politician, spoke very highly of Frances Burney. And she was a remarkable woman. I don't know if you know this, but she ended up trapped in France when the revolution started. And she stayed there for 10 years, where she was like an endless diarist. She was always writing letters and keeping diaries. She underwent a mastectomy while she was in France, survived it, and then recorded the experience down. This was a remarkable woman. So we're going to be reading her first novel, which is her most famous one, Evelina, which is epistolary. So it's done in the form of letters, rather than just straight narration. And that's because the theme of this Febregency is letters. And that brings me to another of the challenges. A bonus challenge is to write a Regency-style chatty letter to a friend. When was the last time you actually wrote to someone pen and paper? Well, this is your chance to do it. I guarantee when you do it to others, you'll find that they are thrilled to receive a handwritten letter. And that's what you saw at the beginning of this video, was all of us doing our own little handwritten letters at the time. So, the other challenges that are involved, which you're going to love, and if you can get into these, this is brilliant for widening your mind towards a certain era and genre of writing. If you really want to get into literature, this is a good way to do it. In university, they'll get you to read sort of the whole oeuvre of an author, so you get steeped in their way of thinking. Well, what we're doing in Febregency is pick a poem written in the Regency period. So, the poems of Regency England, you're looking at ones like Blake and Byron and Wordsworth and Keats and Shelley, and then, of course, the one that's often overlooked, Cooper, spelt Cowper, who was Jane Austen's favourite poet. And of course, you've got Walter Scott. He writes quite a bit of poetry back then as well. So we got Evelina to read. Pick a poem of your choice. The next challenge is pick a Regency play to read. Now, how many times do you read plays other than Shakespeare? And then we jump to the modern, like Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. What plays have you ever read from the Regency period? Because when you read Regency books and that time period, they're always going to the Drury Lane Theatre, or it's one of the pastimes for a lot of Jane Austen's characters. They put on their own plays. You think of Mansfield Park, they're putting on a play there. So go and find a play. Now, you've got quite a few interesting playwrights at the time. So Byron writes one play. Samuel Taylor Coleridge, his play, I think it was Remorse, that was released in the Regency. You've got Jane Scott, if you want a female playwright. She was quite prolific. Janet Bailey, really prolific writer. She was Jeanette Bailey. And then you've also got Thomas Holcroft. Okay, so Thomas Holcroft. Do you know the phrase melodrama? Thomas Holcroft introduced melodrama to the stage of Britain, because melodrama is very high, sentimental, exaggerated, bombastic feelings. This was the era of the sentimental novel and the cult of sensibility. So there's plenty to look at there. See which one grabs your attention. Our next challenge is to read a work or book that is mentioned by or influenced Jane Austen in her writing. So again, there's quite a number. If you want to think of Gothic, you've got all those that are in Northanger Abbey, like the Castle of Otranto. But there's plenty of other books which she gives a nod to or leans towards, makes a reference to. In fact, reading Evelina actually would constitute doing that as well, because Evelina, Frances Burney, big influence on Jane Austen. But of course, she also knew ones like Sir Walter Scott as well. She would have been aware of his literature of the time, because it was dominating on the scene when it came to the Romantic movement. So that's the next challenge. And the final challenge is to read, I love this one, to read a work of non-fiction which is either from the Regency period or about the Regency period. So it could be modern and about the Regency, or you could go back and read something from that period. Now, if you're reading from that period, there are political treatises, which may not be your thing, but there's lots of travel journals written at that time, okay? Sort of a huge amount, and very curious. People were writing about everything. I mean, there's a book written back then, which is all about the influence of the rise and the influence of the potato in society. If that takes your fancy, go and find it. But there are lots and lots of things that you can read from back then which are non-fiction, which will give you an insight into that world. Or if you want to get more into the overview of the Regency from our perspective, there are a lot of books that you can get from the library or from Amazon, which will satisfy you in that. So there you are. That is Febregency, or Febregency, whichever way you wish to call it. And I hope you can join us. What I will say is please go and check out Emma at Bookish Princess, Christy at Dostoevsky in Space, and Jennifer at Jennifer Brookes, because they are all amazing. And I'm not saying I don't do flattery. I cannot stand flattery, okay? They are all really, really good. So go and look them up, subscribe to them, and I'll keep you updated. I may even do a video on books, novels that you could read from the Regency period which are not Jane Austen. So until the next time I see you, I wish you joy in your reading.